Thank you. So we're a couple of minutes late. All ready to go?
Yep.
Excellent. Today the government's announcing a youth offender plan. Although in South Australia we have the second lowest youth offender rate in the country, we recognise there is significant community concern. And what we know is that there is a very small cohort of young people that are contributing to a significant amount of the offending of young people. In fact, there are about 20 young offenders who are responsible for about 11% of all matters before the youth court. What we are looking at doing with this plan is multifaceted. Firstly, we'll be looking to strengthen laws in relation to bail, and we'll be looking at tougher penalties for that very small cohort who are responsible for so much of the offending. We'll also be looking to have laws strengthened in terms of the way police can intervene on street youth gangs, looking at the sort of laws that are available for outlaw motorcycle gangs and how they might be used to disrupt the activities of youth street gangs. In addition to that, there'll be very significant funding to intervene in these young people's lives. We'll have $3 million, that's new money, of programs particularly directed at that very small amount of young people who are committing those crimes. What we want to do is intervene so that young people don't become older offenders and give them the best possible chance not to have that involvement with the criminal justice scheme. All of these measures are designed to try and make South Australia as safe as it can be. There'll be much more consultation, particularly with the South Australian Police over the coming weeks, culminating in an expert roundtable later this month to help to design these new laws and design these new programs. I'll hand over to the Police Commissioner briefly and then happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Attorney. This Young Offenders Plan has come about as a result of several conversations between myself and the Attorney-General and his team, and we are strongly supportive of these measures that are being proposed that will contribute to enhancing safety within the South Australian community by dealing with a very small number of serious young offenders and serious recidivist young offenders, putting steps in place to make sure police have the tools to deal with these young people and making sure that the courts are making determinations in relation to bail and incarceration that use those strict measures appropriately to make sure that the young people who need that type of intervention are able to receive that whilst they are detained. These are very positive steps, bringing the right people around to talk about these measures and implementing them as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Commissioner, is it fair to say that police forces identified the need and have to lobby the state government to push for these laws?
No, I would say the exact opposite. The Attorney and I have been discussing this, as I have with my current Police Minister and previous ministers. There has been a genuine desire to identify opportunities to move forward with changes that, as I said, give police more capacity to deal with young offenders and to increase community safety by dealing more proactively with those very small number of young people who commit serious crime or put community safety at risk through their ongoing recidivist behaviour.
I mean, were you shocked by the fact that 20 young people are responsible for 11% of, those reappearances in youth court?
It's fair to say those numbers are quite stark, and it just hones our focus on where we should be concentrating. The vast majority of young people who come into contact with police or the criminal justice system are diverted away and never come back. We have, overwhelming numbers of children who received informal cautions, formal cautions, or participate in family conferences, learn from the experience and move forward without becoming a recidivist offender. So we are talking about measures being put in place to deal with that very small number who cause the greatest impact on community safety and are overrepresented in the youth justice system.
Does SAFOL have any specific recommendations you can tell us about today that you'll bring to that roundtable? It's toughening bail laws is a pretty broad term, but anything specific?
Well, just in terms of bail laws, there are too many examples of young people who are released on bail despite significant criminal histories and with an appreciation that they're likely to continue reoffending. So there are steps that need to be taken there. But most importantly, I think, is a discussion about replicating some of the powers we have with criminal organisations, gangs, for youth gangs who are much more fluid and less structured than some of the criminal organisations we deal with, but are also equally as responsible for some of the community harms that we're seeing. So being able to deal with youth gangs in a similar way would be a strong or powerful tool for police to be able to improve community safety by dealing with those people in a different way, preventing them from association, preventing them from identifying as a member of a group, shutting down their social media presence where they promote their criminal activities, being able to search certain persons for weapons on the basis that we know that they are likely to be armed. These are the sorts of things that we'll be discussing.
And in terms of the, obviously the $3 million investment program to support young offenders is a really good initiative, but is there something that we should be doing at an earlier stage in terms of education so that these people are never offending in the first place?
That would be the ideal, is that there's an opportunity to intervene with young people and divert them away from criminal activity before they even get started. But we have to recognise that we do have young people who are currently in the system, and the investment that the attorney is talking about is that strong intervention whilst we have them and are able to engage with them to prevent them from continuing to offend or prevent them from becoming adult offenders. It's a worthwhile investment, but you're certainly right. Any investment we can make at the front end that stops children from becoming involved in crime would be certainly worthy of consideration.
Can you give us an insight into how hard it is for you to create policy suggestions that also crack down on offenders but also reduce the rates of recidivism? Stop people reoffending. You obviously come to the table with quite strong recommendations, but you also don't want to see these people come out, be jaded with the system and continue to reoffend.
Well, part of the reason we're having the discussions is to prevent people from becoming recidivist offenders, making sure that the vast majority of young people that we deal with who commit crime receive the appropriate level of intervention without the risk of being detained or being dealt with too harshly. But we do need to take strong positive steps with a very small number who, because of their behaviour, put the rest of the community at risk. So we're very keen to be a part of this discussion. I'm very satisfied with the response we've had from this current government, my minister and the Attorney General. There's a degree of proactivity here, leaning in to look at opportunities to make changes before we have a similar issue that we see in other parts of Australia. I'll leave it to the Attorney.
Do you think that there's any risk here that we're dealing with kids in the same way that we're dealing with outlaw motorcycle gangs?
Of course there are differences. The Police Commissioner's outlined the fluidity in terms of membership. The way people become members in outlaw motorcycle gangs, it's much, much more structured. But there are elements of how we interrupt the activities of outlaw motorcycle gangs, where they can associate, the display of gang symbols, who they can associate with, that we're keen to give the police similar sorts of powers, accounting for some of the differences in the nature of those gangs to make sure they disrupt the activities.
Where's this $3 million coming from? Is it budgeted?
It comes from the Justice Rehabilitation Education Fund. So this is a fund that is proceeds from the confiscation of drug dealers' assets and money. So this is money that sits in a fund, and we're applying that money now to youth offenders for those diversion and intervention programs. So this is money that has been seized from adult criminals that we're going to apply to try and stop people getting involved further in the criminal justice system when they're young offenders.
These 20 people that are facing 11% of all the matters before the youth court, do we have any idea of how many matters they're actually charged with as a total?
Yeah, I don't have figures on what the type of matters are or exactly what they're charged with. I do note that the most common charge for a young person is breach of bail, and some of those can be administrative breaches in terms of where they can be at what times, but then other charges relate to things like property damage and offences against people. So we're really keen to make sure that very small cohort of young offenders who are responsible for so much of the crime, firstly, face tougher sanctions, but then, as the Police Commissioner said, when they're involved in the system, we have programs in place. At the moment, it's very difficult to deliver programs to a young person or other people who are on remand awaiting sentencing. We want to make sure that with this extra $3 million of new money for new programs, we're intervening as early as we can, including before sentencing happens.
Jack Batty will be up after this. We've heard him on morning radio today essentially saying that you've moved too slow on this. I mean, can I get your response to that?
I'll leave that to the opposition. If they want to criticise the action we're taking, that's up to them. we see our responsibility about community safety in South Australia, and if the opposition want to criticise or be negative about this, about the plans for saving the Whyalla Steelworks, whatever it is, yeah, that's up to them, and I think people will make up their own minds.
It's a fair question though. We've been talking about youth crime for well over 12 months now. Has this been something you've been looking at that entire time, or has it come to a head within the last couple of weeks?
Certainly it's something we have been looking at over a long period of time, but once we see figures like that, 20 individuals, young people, responsible for 11% of the matters that come before the youth court, it's really concentrated our minds, and we've worked very closely over recent weeks with SAPOL to get where we are now, and we'll do that in the coming weeks to have legislation in Parliament this year and also to roll out those intervention programs.
What's that timeline look like? So you're meeting for a roundtable in around a month, and then does the legislation be created within months after that?
Yeah, so the roundtable will be the end of this month. We will be having more discussions with SAPOL and other people involved in this area, and then in the coming months we'll be introducing legislation to Parliament for those things that look to look at how these serious recidivist offenders get bail, are treated by the youth court, but also those powers that the police will have as extra powers, looking at the outlaw motorcycle gang legislation, how that could apply to youth street gangs.
Where will these laws stand in comparison to the rest of the nation? Would you say that they're the toughest?
What we want to make sure is these laws are targeting where the problem is. As I said earlier, we have the second lowest rate of youth offending anywhere in the country, only after the Australian Capital Territory. Other states have seen significantly more problems than we have, but we want to make sure we're getting ahead of the curve, designing laws for where the problem is, that small cohort who are recidivist offenders. But that also comes on top of other laws we've passed recently in the State Parliament. We have laws before Parliament for posting and boasting, glorifying the commission of criminal offences, which we see all too often on social media. We have laws that only came into effect in recent months that criminalises adults recruiting children to commit crimes. And of course, this week we're seeing go through the Parliament the toughest knife laws in the country. So there's a whole range of areas that we're addressing some of the ways young people commit or glorify crime, but this is making sure we are targeting to where the problem is arising.
Aside from SAPOL, what other stakeholders will sit around this roundtable to create this policy?
There'll be legal stakeholders, those that are involved in providing programs that can intervene. So there'll be a range of stakeholders from a range of areas coming together for a roundtable at the end of this month.
Commissioner, can I just get your take on Para Hills overnight?
Thank you. Yes, we had an incident overnight involving 7 young people. 4 or 5 of them were 17 years of age, and another 2 were in their early 20s. Two of those people have received stab wounds as a result of this affray, and have been taken to hospital for treatment. Those injuries are not life-threatening. The others have been arrested for affray, and we intend to interview the 2 who are currently receiving hospital treatment in relation to their involvement in that as well. We can say that we have information that informs us that at least 3 of those young people are connected to a youth gang, a street gang, and it would be our desire to use this as an example as to how we would be seeking to prevent these people from congregating, meeting or associating with each other in the future.
Is Operation Meld actively assessing that situation?
Operation Meld is now the Youth and Street Gangs Task Force, and they have carriage of the investigation in relation to the Para Hills incident last night.
What do you think of that behaviour?
Well, not only does it put at risk the people who are involved in the fight and the affray, but it creates a degree of concern within the community in relation to people's general safety moving in and around the community if they think that this is the type of behaviour that's likely to occur. So we'll do what we can to prevent it from happening, and we'll react swiftly when we become aware of planned attacks like this, or respond as quickly as possible when something like this does happen.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.